What's going on, everybody? It's another installment of Shooting It Straight with me, Justin Jackson, and John. First one back since the live post game that we did after the game in Battle for Atlantis against Villanova. Um, we get a big time win this past game against Tennessee, 100-92. It's the type of game that every fan loves to watch, and for me, as an offensive guy, I love to watch a bunch of scoring, bunch of fast-paced tempo game. But I think there were some good things and some things that they can obviously still get better at, which is for me a positive in a game like this where they basically dominated them the entire first half. 60 points in the first half is for me is kind of you're playing at the best you can possibly play in college basketball if you score 60 points in a half. And so I think there was a few different guys obviously that played well. I mean, Mondo had the double double, 22 and 11, and RJ 27. Um, but I'm gonna always ride on that bandwagon with Harrison Ingram and the different things that he does for this team offensively and defensively. You saw the first two shots he shot were catch and shoot threes, which obviously we've talked about this entire season is shooting the ball around Mondo and around RJ. There for a second I was kind of getting worried that my takes as far as this team being a better shooting team than years prior were going to be some bad takes. But last night obviously 42% from three and a bunch of different guys getting involved with it. So I think that was a statement game for sure. I think when you look at the first half, I mean, everything was clicking. Defensively, their intensity and their effort level was the best I've seen all season. It took Tennessee out of their offense basically every time they came down the floor. And I think that goes kind of to the switching schemes that they have, the way that Harrison kind of gives them some versatility defensively, being able to switch out on guards and still be able to guard them. Um, I do want to say I hope that the young fella from Tennessee, I hope his ankle is okay. I hope that he, um, is able to come back from that because he was having an unbelievable game. I think his Dalton Connect. I mean, 37 points in the Dean Dome is pretty freaking impressive. So obviously, prayers to him and his ankle and his journey getting back. But UNC, I thought was unbelievable, and there's a few things that I think that we could talk about. But what did you see while you were watching the game?
Well, Justin, I want to say Roy Williams' favorite phrase might have been everything looks better when the ball goes in the basket. How about the podcasts are a lot more fun to do after a UNC win and after the ball goes in the basket there too. So this is going to be an exciting episode of Shooting It Straight. I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors as well. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. They're your home for Tar Heel gear, and Congruity HR, where Tar Heel fans can get a free payroll and HR needs assessment. I think there was so much exciting about last night's game, just kind of watching it. I think one thing that really stood out to me is Elliot Cadeau's play. He's kind of like that quarterback who can make every single throw on the field, just like the variety of different passes that he made. And not just his assists, because he had 10 assists, but he was throwing unique passes to get out of the press breaks. He was, making swing passes to get to the ball to the opposite corner for corner threes. He was the first Tar Heel to have 10 assists and 0 turnovers in a game since Marcus Page on February 21st of 2015 against Georgia Tech. So another stat that makes sort of
Wow.
his performance stand out. What did you see from Elliot Cadeau last night, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's crazy is he was 0 for 5 from the field.
Mm.
And so most people would look at that and be like, "Oh, he didn't have a great game." Um, but we've talked about all season just his pace and his ability to kind of control how the game is going offensively. I think it was something super small, but for me, as I'm watching the game and I'm watching as the game kind of comes to an end, and there's I think, a couple minutes left, and Tennessee still they're still fighting. Obviously, we haven't talked about the second half yet, but Tennessee was still fighting. They were trying to come back, and I think Tennessee might have gotten a steal or offense or a defensive rebound and got out in transition. We got to stop, and Elliott had a chance to get out in transition, but instead brought the ball up, slowed the tempo down, ran a play, knowing that, obviously at that point, the clock is your friend. And all you want to do is try to get as much time off the clock this next possession, get a good one at the end of the shot clock, and, try to come out with a win that way. But as a freshman, to see that, a lot of freshmen will just take that and just go. It's just an opportunity to get out in transition. Let's go. And to see him do that. And then, like you said, some of the passes he was, delivering. I think a big thing is it's one thing to pass, it's another thing to give people the opportunity to get the ball in scoring positions. And I think when you see him make certain passes, whether it's to a shooter, it's right in the shooting pocket, or it's to a guy down low, it's in a place where they can catch it and go right up. So it's impressive to see the way that he's able to run this team, and make certain plays for certain guys as a freshman for sure. Being 0 for 5, but still being able to play that way. I think a lot of times as freshmen, if you haven't hit a shot at all, you're for sure thinking about, okay, I need to get one to go. I need to. But for him to continue to play 0 turnovers in a game of that kind of intensity, and against a team like Tennessee, I think was really impressive. Um, and I think it just kind of trickles down the rest of the team. You kind of see, the way that everybody else is playing. Everybody else is, more controlled. They went on a spurt in the second half where, they just missed shots and had some turnovers, and it was Tennessee's run. The way basketball works is it's a game of runs. Obviously you hope to not be on the receiving end of, another team making runs at you, but for them to stick with it through the second half, and Elliott be able to control that pace, I think was huge, and it allowed RJ to just be aggressive offensively, on the other side. And I think that's the thing that we've talked about, is it just allows him to be who he is and do what he does, and that's just be put the ball in the bucket. So I think Elliott, for me, when we talk about who should be playing more, who should be starting, that whole conversation, I think he kind of stamped his, okay, I'm here and this is kind of my position, as the season goes on. And so that was really good to see. And I think, even when you look at everybody else, kind of coming off the bench and the minutes that they gave, obviously Cormac came off the bench this game, coming back from his ankle injury, and he came in aggressive, got to the free throw line, hit a couple threes. And a lot of times it's who's going to produce off the bench, and the bench minutes aren't going to be in a game of this magnitude. They're not going to be a lot. But when you look at guys like Jalen Washington, he came in 8 minutes, 3 for 3, provided a couple rebounds and things like that. I think Seth got a decent opportunity. I think Seth is one of those guys that, um, I could definitely see getting some more playing time as the season goes on, just with his consistency defensively and kind of knowing who he is offensively and being able to play to those strengths. So I think overall, when you look at this game, everybody gave something. And that's what's so encouraging for me is this was, obviously Villanova was a big game, but when it comes to, this was a top 10 matchup, and you're playing against a top 10 team that's coming in. And years prior, I don't know what the actual record is, but I know for me when I was at school, Tennessee was a tough out. I think we won by, like, you know, for sure single digits, but it was a tough game the entire game we played against them. I know the year after I left, I think Kenny hit a game-winning shot against them. And so playing against a team like this coming into the Dean Dome, I think that they gave the effort and the intensity that was needed, and what we talked about after that Villanova game of, what kind of team do they really want to be? And, I think once again, it was definitely a statement win and kind of showed people what they can just kind of the tip of the iceberg of what they can be.
I think you also have to give some credit to the environment last night in the Smith Center. I thought it was a really positive environment. You see guys like Harrison, who is just so fired up at so many different points of the game. I think he really feeds off that energy. Another point I wanted to hit on was the 3-point shooting and kind of dive in a little bit deeper there. So last night was the most 3-pointers attempted in a game for UNC last season. So they were definitely sort of firing away. And something that stood out to me as well is a lot of these 3-point shots are assisted. Uh, CBB Analytics, which is one of my go-to sites, they have a stat around assisted shots, like at different zones. And according to that stat provider, all of UNC's corner threes this season have been assisted, which is in the 100th percentile of teams around the country. You're not going to have too many pull-up 3-pointers from the corner, but I think that speaks to the fact that UNC is really swinging the ball, moving the ball well, and finding shooters all up and down the roster. I can even think of one where Armando found a shooter on kind of a short roll last night. So UNC has shooters, but they're also doing a better job of finding them at good spots on the court.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the aspects that I think makes this team so much more exciting to watch. I think there was one possession where I remember when you think of ball movement and you think of beautiful basketball offensively, this was it was the perfect picture of that. I think Armando got the ball in the post, or I think it might have been Harrison, and they sent a double team at him, and Harrison kicked it right out to the guy that was on the wing in front of him. He swung it to the guy at the top. He swung it to the guy on the other wing, and then they swung it to the corner for a wide open three, and he made it. I think that right there is what makes this team so intriguing. Years prior, a lot of times unfortunately, the guy on the receiving end in that corner wasn't necessarily a guy that you were really worried about shooting the ball. And so now you've got four guys around Mondo that you're worried about, and I think too, to go kind of to that point of 3-point shooting, Harrison's versatility offensively causes some issues that opens up a lot of shots for guys on the perimeter. You see a lot of times whenever he doesn't have the drive immediately, he goes right into a back down post up. And if he doesn't have his, quick hook shot or quick turnaround, a lot of times he's making plays for guys out of the post as well. So that's what kind of gives this team a little bit more of a different look. Is it's not always Mondo getting the ball in the paint. It's not always him getting the ball out of the short roll, out of the pick and roll. It's a lot of times it's Harrison, coming off of those situations and creating situations for other guys. And, I think that's what's so hard is if you're going to double either one of those guys in the post, you have to worry about these kick out threes. And if North Carolina is moving the ball and playing unselfishly like they are, it's going to be hard to rotate and cover everything. We always say defensively, you got to give something up. And if you're going to give up a corner three to a shooter, that's going to be a tough game for you, especially if they have it going the way that they had it going last night. So, a lot of times with this team, it's just a matter of, are they going to be able to hit enough threes, because we know Mondo inside is going to get enough attention. Obviously, now everybody knows Harrison likes to mix it up inside as well. So, that they're going to cause some issues inside. So now teams, if they make adjustments to attack that defensively and double them and send another guy at them, are they going to be able to make enough shots outside? And I think the guys that, are shooting the ball for this team are guys that are very capable of making plays, off the dribble, but also capable of knocking down catch and shoot threes. I think when I look at Harrison's stat line, he had 20 points, but he shot 8 threes. Coming into this year, I don't know if Harrison has ever shot 8 threes in a game and either hit 4 threes or, been as confident shooting the three from that perspective. So having guys be able to step into shots and confidently make them, and like you said, Harrison, Cormac, all those guys, you even see Elliot and RJ kind of get, riled up a little bit whenever they make big plays. Having that intensity is what kind of gets me excited. Is, especially last year, you never really saw guys get really, into the game and kind of lose themselves. So I think that's I think that's something that's going to be very good for them going forward, and hopefully they can take that into the next games.
I'm doing a quick check here. Looks like Harrison went 3 of 9 from 3 last year against Washington State. But yeah, I think your point holds. This is one of his best shooting games, certainly as a Tar Heel, but maybe overall in his career, going 4 of 8 from the 3-point line last night. I do want to flip over to the other side of the ball a little bit. Let's talk about UNC's defense, because I think there is some opportunities for improvement there. We already talked about Dalton Knecht. He played a great game. That's just an individual performance. I mean, he was hitting some shots in like the corner 3 zone where, you just can't guard that really. But also, Tennessee shot really well from the 2-point range. They were 26 of 35 on 2-pointers last night. Obviously, they scored 92 points as well, which is pretty high. Justin, what did you see from UNC on the defensive end? And can you also sort of speak to UNC's defensive strategy of kind of, it looks like they were switching everything on the perimeter and trying to get the right matchups for themselves in each possession.
Yeah, I mean, when you watch the first half, like I said before, their ball pressure, their full court pickup, their intensity, it took Tennessee really out of everything that they had. When you look at Tennessee last night, they had two guys really that were doing everything for them. And in the first half, James was really the guy that kept them, even as close as they were. He was making some timely buckets, getting some offensive rebounds, things like that. So I think the first half, when you look at their defense, they came out and played exactly how they were supposed to play. They were fired up for this game. Intensity wise, they were all over the floor. The switching, I think, is something that is a game changer, especially in college basketball. I think a lot of times, especially this year, when you look at college basketball, the fives on the floor usually aren't able to switch and guard multiple positions. You look at a guy who's like a national player of the year, like Zach Edey. A lot of times Purdue doesn't want him switching on a guard. So they're going to have him in some sort of coverage or, maybe showing and trying to get back. Well, with a guy like Mondo, or when they go small with Harrison or even Jalen Withers or Jalen Washington, being able to switch takes other teams out of the offense that they're used to being able to run. And so I think that's what you kind of saw in the first half for sure. Is I don't know if Tennessee was necessarily ready for, okay, we're running this action to try to get Mondo, on a guard. And all of a sudden Mondo's switching and he's able to stay in front of a guard. Or we're doing all of these actions and now all of a sudden Harrison is the one switching onto a guard. Those things cause problems for offenses. I think Tennessee did a great job in the second half of changing their offensive mentality and putting the ball in Dalton's hands, because him being 6'9", being able to play make off the dribble, even if you send a double, he's big enough that he can see things. So I think to their credit, they made some changes in the second half that kind of, made North Carolina figure out what they wanted to do defensively. But then you saw, you know, one big thing that we talked about in the Villanova game was why were we not hitting or doubling big fella down low when he had it going? I think as you know, and I don't want to get his last name wrong and keep saying his last name wrong, but so I'm just going to say Dalton. Um,
It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
yeah, it's an interesting one. But as he got it going, obviously, 37 points, it's he was in a different zone. But as he got it going, a lot of times when you saw guys coming up into screens, then they would just trap the ball screen, and make him give the ball up and make somebody else be the playmaker and make a play. And so I think that kind of adjustment for sure helped North Carolina, but it's also it shows that, okay, if they get in games where a certain guy has it going, they can go to this and still play defense out of rotations and not give up a lot of, open looks or things like that. So, I think there were definitely some parts of the game where I think North Carolina, like you said, defensively, they, Tennessee shot 55%, from inside the 3-point line. And a lot of that was either There were some straight line drives, some blow bys. There were some offensive rebounds. There were, their big, hit a couple shots, kind of mid post, face up shots. So, overall, I think the way that they played defense was exactly how they, were supposed to come out. And I think it's if they play defense that way, throughout the season, hopefully they don't have many guys that put up 37 in games and, play really well from that standpoint. And if they play defense the way that they played last night, I think it's going to cause some issues, especially against teams that, aren't necessarily as good as Tennessee or don't have players as good as Tennessee. So I'm excited to see if they're able to take this momentum. Um, and, whether it's they're playing on the road or some of these games coming up that are neutral sites or they're at home. Hopefully, they can take that energy level and take it into every game.
Yeah, Tennessee shot 55% on field goals last night, 32% from three. And then on two pointers, they actually shot 74.3%. They were 22 of 35. What about offensively for North Carolina in the second half? It looks like such a big part of the first half was tempo, and UNC was
Mhm.
really being aggressive with the ball and pushing the pace. Do you think maybe they took their foot off the gas too much in the second half, trying to, like you said, bleed the clock? Or, the clock is your friend there as well. What did you see from UNC offensively in the second half? Because we already sort of talked about how Tennessee climbed back in the game. But UNC, what did you see there?
I think it was just like you said to start the podcast off, it's everything is way better when you're making shots. And I think in the second half they just went cold for a decent stretch. They had some turnovers that, were kind of ill advised and maybe they were, moving a little too fast or, trying to slow the ball a little too much. But I think a lot of times when these runs happen, teams just kind of go cold, and the runs are in this game was a really big one. Obviously you'd like to keep runs a little bit smaller and try to get the momentum back on your side. But when I look at kind of the way that the game was going, they were stuck on 78 for a while, which a lot of times when you look at it, you know, it was a missed three-pointer, missed layup, turnover, missed jumper, missed layup. Uh, so it's a missed layup by Elliot. So you as you go throughout that time when you really pay attention to it, it's not necessarily something they were doing wrong. It was just they weren't hitting shots at the same clip that they were hitting in the first half. And in the first half was unbelievable how they were playing offense. You can't expect them to be able to play that well the entire game. It just doesn't work that way in basketball. So when you see that, having turnovers, having missed shots, to still be able to kind of, grab the ropes back, and I think there for a while Tennessee got the game down to like 7. And then I think North Carolina took a timeout and they got the lead back up to 15. And when you see a team be able to bounce back and do that and still keep the composure and keep, their mindset the same way, I think that's a great sign because there's going to be games like this where you're not going to be up 22 points against a team like this. You might only be up 7 and they might make a run where they go up 5 or they go up 10. And how are you going to bounce back from that situation? And so that's what makes me encouraged even watching is that, as I'm watching, I'm kind of like, man, I'm talking, I've got in-laws that are huge Tennessee fans and, I'm talking trash to them as the game goes on. And, as that lead starts going down to all of a sudden it's down to 12 and it's down to 9 and they hit another 3, it's down to 7 and it's like, hold on, like, you start getting a little nervous, but for them to be able to bounce back, kind of gain control of the game again and get that lead back up and finish the game out, I think is the biggest takeaway from that. And so I don't think it's necessarily anything, that they need to look at and change. Maybe shot selection within those misses. Maybe the shot selection wasn't great during that time, or it was maybe they just weren't getting the best quality shots like they were getting in the first half. But for me, when I watch it, I think it was just a matter of they were just missing some shots, and Tennessee was coming down the other end and making some. And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing for me. And as we go, throughout the rest of the season, I think it's in a game like this. I think it kind of shows certain things. It shows can they bounce back from runs. It shows who should be playing more. Um, and I think that's kind of for me when I watch this game. I think when I say Elliott's kind of stamped his position, whether it is starting or coming off the bench, I think playing that much is what Elliott needs to be doing for this team. I think obviously Cormac, whether he's in that starting lineup or he's coming off the bench, I think is the other guy that's gonna, be huge for these guys. And then, for me right now, I think it's Seth being the defensive on the defensive end for me is what I think gives him the most opportunity to play more. And for me, I was, I love Jalen Washington and what he brings offensively. I wouldn't even mind seeing Jalen Washington play alongside Mondo sometimes, because I think sometimes the issue that Jalen Washington runs into is defensively, he's obviously just not, he's not a physical type of player, and coming from somebody who's was in that same position and, still I'm not this physical brute. I can respect that because he has other ways that he can affect the game. And so I think if you were to see Jalen Washington going at the four, that causes issues because he's able to stretch the floor, but it still gives offensive rebounding opportunity. It gives us better rebounding defensively, gives us better rim protection still. So I wouldn't even mind seeing him play alongside Mondo a little bit, and obviously defensively, if he's able to stay in front of the ball a little bit better, if he's able to kind of show a little bit more physicality, I think, he's another guy that could possibly have, some more minutes. But for me, the way that they played last night, some guys played some big minutes, but at the end of the day, to win games, sometimes guys have to, kind of suck it up. And that's what preseason conditioning's for. That's what, the practices are for, the running after practices. That's what all that is for games like this when you got to play 37, 38 minutes, or, you got to play stretches of 9, 10 minutes at a time. And, you got to kind of push through that and still be able to produce for the team. So I think that's kind of what I took from the game. And, I think going into their first conference game, I think kind of watching how they played this game. I haven't seen too much of Florida State, but kind of watching how they played against a team like this, if they're able to take this into the next game, I think, they're more than capable of coming out, with the win and, I think pretty handedly. So I'm interested to see if they're able to do that going into these next few games.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point to bring up as well. UNC heading into ACC play. I think the ACC is wide open this year. I mean, you look at some of the top teams in the conference. Obviously, Duke just lost last night to Arkansas, who UNC beat earlier in the season. You have Virginia, which is obviously always Virginia, Clemson, which has gotten off to a hot start. But there's not like, that elite team in the conference. So I think that, and when you look at the overall conference depth as well, this isn't the strongest the ACC has been, especially like historically when you were playing, Justin. So first conference game on Saturday for North Carolina against Florida State, and an opportunity to kind of set the tone for an ACC year when there maybe isn't that dominant team. Someone's going to have to win it. So why not have it be North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's definitely wide open. Teams from top to bottom aren't necessarily the strongest. I was saw some sort of stat that they don't even have the ACC in the top five of the
Mhm.
strongest conferences this year, which is wild to see because for the longest it was anytime you brought up what's the best conference, ACC was the first out of people's mouths. So I think that gives North Carolina an opportunity to take advantage of timing and situations. I think now when you look at it, like you said, those guys down the road lost to Arkansas last, right after the game against Tennessee, and you see games like Virginia, and you're just kind of seeing different looks of the ACC. I watched some highlights of Virginia, and they're known for obviously the pack line defense. Defensively, they're hard to play against, but offensively, they look totally different. You had guys shooting off the dribble threes. You had guys, playing off of ISO basketball and taking it down the lane and dunking it. So it's just a different look this year in the ACC. So it should be interesting. It's going to be fun to watch as fans. Kind of seeing those different matchups and different games. But obviously, that's North Carolina's job to kind of take this conference by storm and kind of take the lead of it. And anytime you're able to get out to a good start, in the season, especially in the conference play, I think it gives you more confidence. But it also gives you some, down the road, whenever you're kind of in the thick of conference play, it gives you kind of some, you know, we've played this team already, some things that we did really well to beat them. So it gives you some things that you can take going forward, especially as the season kind of gets into that daunting stage of, okay, we've already played this team before. Now we got to play them again. What do we need to do? So I'm interested to see how they kind of take that. But I think, you know, against Tennessee, I think it was a huge encouraging sign for me. And I think, even though they, now Tennessee has 3 losses, I think it was still a statement win from the standpoint of just showing kind of the country what this team is capable of doing on both ends of the floor. So I'm excited for this team.
It's also a good sign heading into the rest of the gauntlet. We've talked about Florida State, but Connecticut, UConn is coming up, Kentucky is coming up, and Oklahoma is coming up. So it gives you a lot of confidence heading into those games as well. Justin, I did want to get to a listener submitted question this week. For anyone listening, feel free to send a question along via the Inside Carolina message boards, tweet it at Jackson at Jackson's Twitter account. What's your Twitter account, Justin? Can you tell people?
I think it's JJax_44. I'm
All
not
right,
totally sure. I don't have it on my phone, but we will for sure make sure that we look at all the questions and get those figured out if we want to bring those onto the show and things like that. So yes, for sure, send that to my Twitter, or obviously John's Twitter if you need to, so that we can make sure that we get those and we can talk about those a little bit.
it's a little easier for me to see it. I have a few less followers than Justin. So, but we had a question this week around coaching attire. So kind of a fun one. This is submitted from listener Alex. She was asking about coaching and what coaches wear during the pandemic. A lot of coaches went away from the suit and tie look that was so common. You think of Roy Williams, who wore a suit and tie for so many games over all the years. Justin, do you want to see head coaches, dressed in a suit and tie, or do you like it when they're in that more casual gear, or maybe wearing a Hawaiian shirt when they're in the battle for Atlantis?
I for me, I don't really mind. I think Coach Davis wearing the suit brings some nostalgia for me. Obviously, everybody knows Coach Williams and how he used to wear suits, and if he used to get mad, he used to tear that suit off. And a lot of times, people don't really know, but if we ever lost a game and he wore a certain suit, he wouldn't wear that suit for the rest of the season. And I think it was funny for us as players because for me, I'm not a superstitious guy. So, if I have a bad game in a certain pair of shoes, I'm not going to throw those shoes away and never wear those again. For me, I just had a bad game. That's just kind of what happened. But certain people, they take those, superstitions and they are real serious about it. So for Coach Williams, that was kind of something for him. And so now seeing Coach Davis with the suit back on, he's got a little bit of a different look with the polo on underneath the suit jacket. I don't think I ever saw that with Coach Williams. So Coach Davis is kind of bringing a little razzle dazzle of his own to that sideline, which I think is interesting. But for me, I don't really mind either one. I think I'm a real relaxed guy, anyways. All I wear is really sweats or you know joggers and things like that if I don't have to wear anything else. So for me, if you want to wear if you want to wear a polo or a Hawaiian shirt or some Lululemon pants on the sideline, if you want to do that, like I'm cool with it. But kind of seeing Coach Davis back in that suit and what he was wearing, I think is definitely nostalgic for me, and I think is a I think it kind of brings then you see Coach Williams watching the game up there, and it just kind of brings a little bit of that old look to it, and I don't. Coach Davis is doing an unbelievable job coaching. Now he's kind of bringing his swagger when it comes to his attire. So hey, look, whatever brings out wins and whatever gets his guys going and gets him going coaching wise, I'm all for it.
You mentioned Roy Williams was a little bit superstitious. Do you think Coach Davis, Hubert Davis, is superstitious as well? Does he share some of that with his predecessor?
I don't know. I never really talked to him too much about superstition, but I never really saw things. As he was an assistant with us, I never saw him do certain things that were, you could say were superstitious. Coach Davis never really seemed that way. He always wore the same shoes. It seemed like the same outfit to coach in for practice. So I think Coach Davis, I think, is just kind of go with the flow type of guy. So um, I don't know. I don't know if maybe against that game against Villanova, if he threw that shirt or half quarter zip that he had on, if he threw that away or not, or if he still comes into the office with it. So you know, whatever Coach Davis is doing, I think is a positive right now, and he should just continue doing what he's doing because it seems to be working.
Shooting It Straight podcast is coming to you every Thursday on the Inside Carolina YouTube channel. Check us out on whatever you listen to your podcast on as well. One final stat from me before we get out of here today, Justin. Everyone's talking about the Elliot Cadeau, Kendall Marshall comparisons. I looked this up. Kendall Marshall did not reach 10 assists until his 22nd game as a Tar Heel. Elliot Cadeau got it in his 7th game. And he is also a young kid. He should be a high school senior. So I think that bodes well for the rest of the season for the Tar Heels. Justin, anything left? Get us out of here after a big win over Tennessee last night.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we've been waiting for. Is this North Carolina team to come out and play with that intensity against a great opponent, like this. I think it just going forward against kind of the gauntlet like we talk about. I think it's going to be huge. Once again, to everybody listening, obviously, I kind of have a little. I don't know if it's allergies, a little sinus congestion, whatever it is, but I appreciate y'all listening, and hopefully y'all are able to make it through without turning it off or just turning subtitles on because I totally understand. But we thank you once again for tuning in and kind of listening to us talk about this North Carolina team a little bit. Um, I think it's going to be very, very fun to watch as the season goes on. Um, and yeah, I hope everybody has an unbelievable day. Hope everybody has an unbelievable week. And until next time.